Okay, cool. So today, on the second session, let's talk about simple variables. So, what is a variable? In programming, the two sort of very important concept is data and logic. So far we don't really have any logic. We just go through instructions line by line and we do whatever there is. There's no there's no situational things that a program may react. It just kind of does what it's supposed to do. So in order to take a step up from there, we can start with a variable. So variable is somewhere where you can store data, basically, and each variable will have a unique name in context and a value. Okay, so why do we use variables? First of all, it makes the program just easier to understand. It breaks down your steps into smaller, easier to digest, like sections. And if you give a variable a really good name that's very descriptive, then it's a lot easier for other people who don't know your code to understand what your code is trying to do as well. Secondly, let's have an example here. Let's go back to our console log. Let's say if I want to do this, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say I want to do this 7 times, right? So now if I want to run this, I say hello world 7 times. Cool. And now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, instead of saying hello world, I want to say hello world, my name, and it'll be hello world Octavic. And now I have to go through and edit every single one of these lines. So it says this, and I save, and I hit that. And now it says hello world Octavic 7 times. But notice how I have to do that, edit on every single one of these commands, because they're separate. Each command does their own thing. So what we should do in this case is save the message in a variable and then print that variable instead of printing the message directly. That way, if we modify the variable, then subsequently all of these commands will print out the new updated value. Okay, and we'll see how we do about that in a second here. So first of all, in order to create a variable, you need to give it a name. The name should be, there's a couple of things about these names. So these rules are not like absolute. Your program won't scream at you or refuse to compile if you don't follow them, except for the third one. Sometimes editors knows not to let you include special characters. But for a good variable, it should be, first of all, the name should be unique. Most programming language would not let you reuse variable names, and even if they let you, you should typically not reuse variable names because it gets very confusing. So within context, which for now we just have one context, we have our basic file which does everything, but in the future, within context, your variable should have a unique name. And secondly, the variable name should be descriptive of what the variable represents. So let's say in our case, we're trying to print out a message. So I will call this variable a message or welcome message, even more specific because it's saying like hello world or like welcome, whatever. And the last one, name should not include special characters. So that includes like brackets, stars, exclamation mark, sometimes numbers. Numbers are sometimes unavoidable if you want to do a lot of things in a row, but there are other ways to deal with them, and I try to not use numbers in variable naming. You can actually use underscore, and there are different naming conventions that people follow. So this is getting a little bit more into detail. Some people like to say like my name with an underscore to replace space, and that's a valid variable name. You can name your variable this way if you want. Some people like what's called a camel case, my name. So it combines all the words, but with every new word, just capitalize the first letter, and it's called camel case because it's like the hump of a camel. Because you don't have a hump in the beginning, you don't have a hump at the end. You just have hump in the middle where the words meet. So that is also a fine way of naming. Typically, you just work with whatever you're comfortable with, and if you're working in a project, like go with whatever like the project agreed to go with. Okay, but overall, that's how you would name a variable. So there are many types of variables. So we talk about variable name, we talk about variable values, but there are different types of value. So one thing to understand is that in programming, things are very rigid. Like it's very specific what something can be. So let's talk about the 3 type of basic variables that we'll deal with in the next couple of sessions. So first off, we have a number. Very straightforward. So we can have a var my number. Can't spell my number, and this number can be anything. It can be a whole number, it can be a digit, it can also be you can also give an expression if you want to. But though this is more of a math, but yeah, it doesn't have to be a integer. It can be any number basically. Next, we have the string. So as you actually already have been playing around with strings. So remember in our first class, we had console log hello world. So this is a string, and you can tell it's a string because it's indicated by the double quotation mark, which dictates that whatever goes in between these is considered a string. And your console, and by giving the string to this function, it's now printing it out on your terminal. And you can do the same thing with a number as well. Like instead of that, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how I don't put quotation mark around these because I want the program to understand that this is a number, not a string. And it will print the number just as well. Now, of course, if I don't use quotation mark around a string, computer gets confused. What is that? I don't know what this is. And it's considering these to be variables in a way, and because we don't have this variable name in context, computer is saying like, oh, I don't know what this is, this probably is an issue. So that's why we use quotation marks to separate what we're trying to call with from between variable names and strings that we're trying to print or trying to utilize in some way. Cool. So how do we create a variable and how do we give variable values? So you already saw those example before, but we just use the var keyword. So right here, var. So the var keyword, you just type in var. After that, followed by a variable name. So in my case, I'll call it my variable. And there you go. Now you have a variable with a name called my variable. Okay. And how do you give variable values? It's with the equal sign. So when you have a variable name, say I can call my variable, and you can equals. So this does not mean you're evaluating the value with what's on the right side. You're assigning a value to this variable. So if I want to say I want to type in the variable 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can test that out by doing a console log. And now if we run this, we get 1, 2, 3, 4. So what just happened? We declared a variable with a name called my variable. We assigned a value, which is a number value 1, 2, 3, 4. And we tell the computer to print whatever is inside this variable, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see in the result, that is indeed what happened. Cool. And now, and if you want to get fancier, you can do these two things in one single step. You don't have to declare a variable and then assign a value. You can just put this right here, and it will work just fine. Cool. You just kind of initialize the value of the variable as it's declared, which makes it a little bit more neat, right? You're creating a variable and you instantly assign a value. So this one line is very descriptive of what you're trying to do. Cool. So now, how do you manipulate variables? So as you seen earlier, you can assign whatever value you want to a new variable. You can even mix types, even though it's not very recommended. So right now my variable is a number. I can assign it to a message saying hello. And nothing wrong will happen because the old value is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it gets overridden with the value hello exclamation mark. And now when we print the variable, we get hello exclamation mark. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing this. Only downside is that the variable now becomes kind of confusing. Is it a number? Is it a string? It's not the greatest to deal with. So typically, I would recommend against doing this. If you need to use a different type of variable, just declare a new variable. Okay, and for numbers, very obviously, you can add the numbers, you can subtract the numbers, you can multiply, divide, whatever you want. And you do that by something like this. You declare two numbers, and you declare two variables, giving each one a numeric value, and you can just use a math equation to get a result, and you can assign the result onto another variable. In this case, I just call the resulting variable result, but you can call it whatever you want. So if we can copy this, and we can, okay, and then we can print out the result. So before I hit enter, you can try to guess what the result is going to be. And of course it's 3 because we have 1 and 2, and this expression adds them and put whatever the result is into this variable, and then now we're printing the result. Okay, cool. So next we have strings. So strings, like I said, is a message or just like a chain of letters and numbers and whatever you want in between. So like just like numbers, you can add strings together as well, which means you just kind of combine them into one bigger string. So here's an example. Let's go string A equals hello. Now to do this, var string B equals world. Var result equals string A plus string B. Then you can console.log the result. So again, before I hit enter, you can go ahead and try to visualize what the result is going to be. And of course, it's hello world because it adds this string and it just kind of append whatever this is on the end. So this lets us do some very cool things. So for example, we can have var welcome message. Welcome to our programming session. And instead of this, we can have something like a username. And in our case, will be Dr. Octavic. So now, of course, I need to change up the names because I changed what they're called. So if I run the old program, it will not find string A and string B. So now if I do this, look at that. It's making it kind of stitch together a full sentence by giving part of the sentence. But because username is a variable, if we decide to log in as someone else, let's say we're logging as John Smith, and then we run this, all of a sudden it says, welcome to our programming session, John Smith. So this is an example of actually using something that's more reactive in a part of string editing. Cool. So the concept of variable is something that should be pretty straightforward. You can think of it as a box that has a label, which is the name, and inside the box there's content, which is the value. So as a homework, just get used to the feeling of playing around with variables. The main thing is to just practice creating variables, assigning value to variables, and printing those variables as a result to see what's actually in those variables. So we have our hello world example. I kind of already did this in my showcase, but it's always better to try things out yourself. Go ahead and create a variable called message, assign value hello world to that variable, and try to print it to see the result in your terminal. You can, of course, play around with string concatenation. Because it's a string, you can't really subtract a string from a string. It doesn't really make sense. So you can add string to other strings, kind of make a really big message. You can also just add message to itself and print that as well. You can try things out. So that is it for this session. Thank you guys for coming. I'll see you next time.